So, welcome. Let's kick off formally. My name's Lee Cottier. I am one of the Think Productive Productivity Ninjas. You can see from my picture that I have both a summer plumage and a winter plumage, currently clean shaven. That really is me in the picture on screen. Welcome both returners and first timers, and also people watching back on the YouTube recording. You're welcome too, to our little Productivity Ninja Skills taster session this morning. Particularly, our topic is Ninja Stealth and Camouflage. Some of you might have heard of that before and will be intrigued to work on it. Some of you might be thinking, what on earth is that all about? Just very quickly for very first timers, we're Think Productive. We're a training coaching company founded in the UK, but we've now spread worldwide. And we work with all sorts of peoples in lots of different professions and organizations. And we help people with two things. We help people get their stuff done. So that's the productivity side of things. But we're also equally interested in something else that's inextricably interlinked with our efforts to tick off those to-dos, to pummel those tasks. That other thing sometimes is called well-being, work-life balance, having a life. And whether it's half-day sessions, full days, tasters, keynotes, conference talks, lunch and learns. Very aware it was Learning at Work week last week. We're interested in all that good stuff. So welcome, particularly first timers. We're here in a Zoom webinar today. I expect that you're all familiar with Zoom webinar, but just in case there's a little sort of a tour on the screen, I can see a couple of people have turned on closed captions for themselves. Those are available if they would help you. But just to warm us up, if you've not yet typed anything in the chat, please do so now, so we're sure that everybody knows where the chat is, even if it's just to say good morning and hiya, or I'm back, or whatever it is. And then the other thing that would be really useful, which we might use later, is if you all just want to try and use the raise hand button temporarily as well, because if you want to speak later on, you can't actually unmute yourself. You actually have to raise your hand to ask me to unmute you, which is fantastic. That's brilliant. I can see everybody raising your hands. You can stop that now. I'm going to lower all the hands at this end. So when we got a chance where we can bring people into the discussion, then we can have that later on. Fantastic. Those are the primary methods that we're going to interact with. You'll see there is also a Q&A section as well. Sometimes people prefer to use that. And if there's something you particularly want to ask, maybe in the later part of the session, we can also bring in the Q&A panel as well. But chat and raise hand to speak on voice will do you proud, and it will be fine. So let's crack on. 3 minutes of intro and we're into the good stuff. What are we going to do today? So some of you who've met us before, perhaps we've come and worked with you, or you've read my colleague Graham's How to Be a Productivity Ninja book, will be familiar with and might have worked with what we call the 9 characteristics of the productivity ninja. We're only going to meet and talk about one of them today, but in general, we use these little characters. You can see them with their intriguing sounding names to allow us to interrogate, troubleshoot, think about, reflect on how something might be going when it comes to that work versus well-being, or the interrelationship between the two. And to think of tactics, behaviors, mindsets, approaches, kind of good stuff that we can do to kind of make the doing of things better, and also attend to looking after ourselves and each other at the same time. So if you're intrigued by today's little session and you would like to know more, we're going to have lots of opportunity for you to indulge in all sorts of other stuff from the other 9 ninjas after the session. But today we're doing a whole little mini session on, I have to say, one of my favorites. If people were to force me to pick the top 3, I'm not going to reveal who the other 2 are today. I would say that Stealth and Camouflage is probably up there in the top 3. It's a little bit playful, it's a little bit offbeat, it's a little bit rebel. Those of you who've worked with productivity ninjas before will know that we're kind of into all that good stuff. But also done with good heart and good intent and the interests of getting stuff done just a little bit better and a little bit easier. And it's very much an important ninja characteristic these days, because those of you who've heard of us before will know that we don't tend to talk about ourselves as a time management training company, but we're really, really interested in attention management. There's just so many things, and we're going to talk about them in a minute, which are interrupting our attention, our focus, our flow bombarding us with distractions and interruptions. And we tend to find that it's really, really difficult once the spell is broken to get back into that sweet spot for good focused attention in terms of getting stuff done. Why might that be important? Well, there's just so many distractions, isn't there? It's really, really hard to just get maybe 30 minutes stuck together end to end without somebody pinging something into our brain or walking up to us and saying, "Oh, are you busy? Have you got 2 minutes?" Right, you haven't. Well, never mind, because I need to talk to you anyway. So head to the chat, drop in your list of favorite distractions, interruptions, all the things that take you away from that focus and flow that we do need occasionally to get our good deep work done. And if anybody wants to come in on voice for a couple of minutes and just talk about their experience of distractions, you can also do that. I will look for raised hands. Meanwhile, for the benefit of the YouTube recording, who won't see your chat messages, I'll just pull out a few key themes that I can see arriving in a big scroll. So email, people asking me questions, Teams calls, the hubbub of working in an open plan office, the phone. Dennis, you should now have the ability to unmute at the other end. Come in and add your thoughts too.
I think the other things, Lee, that I pick up on is just the sheer volume of distracting emails from newsletters and subscriptions that actually add no value to your day.
Yes.
I recently did an analysis of a month's worth of emails into my inbox and discovered that I got 4,000 emails, but I only sent 200 in total for the month.
Wow, there's something that we might learn from that proportion. I think I know you're a regular on these sessions, Dennis, and that you've implemented probably the full gamut of productivity ninja skills. But like, yes, the rest of the group will probably also be feeling that email overload. I'm just picking up other stuff from the chat. Cheers, Dennis. Now Dennis has spoken, other people will pitch in too. People at the door, people, the children, the dog. I know you are busy, but Teams messages, chat messages, the phone, WhatsApp. We get the theme. Yeah, there's all sorts of things going on. And if the real kind of secret sauce to getting our good stuff done is this correct managing of attention, then maybe we need to do something about it. And the Stealth and Camouflage Ninja is here to help us with that. And it's particularly important when we recognize that there are actually two kinds of work that we tend to do as productivity ninjas. Those of you who've been on some of our sessions before might have heard about boss mode and worker mode. The rest of you can learn a little bit more about that in the book. We all have boss mode and worker mode, whether we look after other people in the team. It's like doing the stuff and also traffic controlling the workflow. But I also want to bring in another kind of two-part structure here as well. The idea that we work in both team mode and solo mode. And they're both really, really important, but sometimes they get in the way. And the lovely contributions they had in the chat about all the interruptions are probably focusing you in on the challenge that we're talking about here. Team mode. Yes, we need to collaborate, communicate, connect, correspond, meet. All that good stuff is necessary and really, really important. But we also need, whatever our role, big kind of sections of getting our head down, stepping away, stepping back, going a little bit stealthy. You can hear the name of the characteristic coming in already. And just being able to get your head down and get something done free from interruption and distraction. And it's really important that we do both and we do both well. But you might find that today, particularly when we're talking about the stealth and camouflage tactics that I'm going to be asking you to work up in a minute, that a lot of what we're talking about is about creating that good space and that good opportunity for proper solo mode work as well. I'm just going back to the chat and bringing up some other stuff. Notifications about an email, so you're getting it twice. People messaging you or walking up to you to ask you that you got an email, telling you, I've just sent you an invite for it. You're like, yeah, I've seen it. So there's also a lot of duplication going on in tools as well. If you've got any other final thoughts on the enemy of distraction and interruption, do put it in the chat. Or if we've got one more person that wanted to come in on voice with a reflection, now would be your moment. Meanwhile, I will just summarize what you have noticed in your own contributions, that there's actually two kinds of interruption and distraction, both of which we might be able to leverage some stealth and camouflage on. Jane, there, you've hit the spot exactly, just as before I put the slide up here. Sometimes it's about the internal distractions and interruptions, but also a lot of you listed some of the external distractions and interruptions as well. Martin there, again, really good contribution. The fact that some of this tangle and tumble happens because of our own kind of feeling like, I just need to read them all immediately, respond to them all, and everything else like that. And we may find ourselves pushing back and testing some of those assumptions in a minute. Kathy there says, interrupting myself by jumping between tabs and applications and windows. Yes, such is the modern reality of the digital and particularly the hybrid workplace as well. We're going to say some things about that in a minute. So we're 11 minutes in. We've probably thoroughly doomed and desolated ourselves, but hopefully we've centered ourselves around a common experience. So let's spend the next little while thinking about ways to make it better. And we're going to do that by being inspired by, as we say, number 4 of the 9 characteristics of the productivity ninja, which is stealth and camouflage. And I'm going to introduce to you 3 different flavors of stealth and camouflage. But once you kind of catch the bug, you'll start finding new and additional ways to use it. It's a mindset, it's an attitude, it's a set of perhaps playful or challenging behaviors, by which I mean challenging the status quo or your existing habits, which recognize that we do need to do both team and solo mode. But particularly this solo mode work that we've all talked about is very, very much under attack. And we might need to do some little changes in terms of habits, protocols, behaviors, methods of work to kind of create those windows. So the 3 flavors of stealth and camouflage are physical stealth and camouflage. You can kind of get an idea what that might be about. Digital stealth and camouflage. Again, there's been loads and loads of chat contributions about that. And we'll also finish up this section by talking a little bit more about social stealth and camouflage, which is the way to kind of make this a fair team play. So physical stealth and camouflage is about this feeling. If you've got an instinctive gut reaction to this image, or it speaks to one of your own experiences, please do put it in the chat. But this is about the thought that we probably more often than not have, which is, do you know what? I just have a chance of pulling some of this stuff off if I could avoid all other humans for a bit. We've got a picture there of somebody in the office worrying that somebody's going to walk up to the desk. The dream, says Jane. Yes, it would be the dream. Remember, this is deliberately playful. We do like people, and we know that work happens in teams. But just occasionally, being around other people is not the secret sauce for getting our stuff done. And physical stealth and camouflage was always a tactic in the open office, in the workspace. But of course, there's possibly 2 different main scenarios or formats in which we need to use it now, and it might happen in a slightly different way. So I'm going to ask you in a minute to think about your experiences of, or your issues with, or your own tactics for physical stealth and camouflage, perhaps in the home/remote workspace. We're aware that we have lots of different setups and lots of different households and lots of different contexts. And so getting that kind of physical solitude for little windows and dashes could be different for all of us as well. I've put up perhaps two end states on the different continuum between the opportunity for physical stealth and camouflage in the home workspace. Do let me in the chat know in the chat if you find yourselves recognizing one of those more than the other. And there's also the idea of what could we do in the physical office as well. Like some of us don't go into the office as much as we did now with the hybrid working pattern. That can mean that when we do go in, there's loads and loads of people in there that go, whoa, haven't seen you for ages. Let's chat. And it's like, no, I came in to do some important stuff. So we've got a few minutes to just pause here. Exactly what I wanted has already started in the chat. So please put in your own thoughts, reflections, or tactics or opportunities to leverage a bit of Ninja Stealth and Camouflage in the physical mode. And we've also got a few minutes if somebody wanted to come in on voice as well. I will look for raised hands. Meanwhile, for the benefit of the recording, I will share some of your good stuff. But first of all, Gemma's going to come in with a thought here on physical stealth and camo.
I, when I come into my office, I work in my office predominantly, and there's only 2 days of the week where there are a lot of people in. It's incredibly overwhelming. And one of the things I've considered doing, and don't know if it seems really rude, so haven't done it yet, is to get a little flag system. So either a red or a green flag. So if I'm up for a chat, the green one's up, and if I'm not, the red one's up. And I can't work out if it's acceptable behavior or not to do it, but it's there. The thought is there to do it.
Do you know how you'll find out? By trying it. Let's just see how it goes. We would talk about that as social stealth and camouflage, that kind of like letting people know at the 10 paces distance rather than the two paces distance what kind of work mode you're in, and whether or not now is good or not good, etc. Because like they won't know, will they?
I also at the moment use headphones, so if I've got my headphones on with my mic towards my mouth, people think I'm in a meeting. I'm just not talking. So that one's another little tactic I use quite a lot.
So no earbuds, I'm lonely or procrastinating, please talk to me. Or one earbud, if you have to. Two earbuds and boom mic down, no, back off.
Yeah,
if anybody is attending from the office at the moment, I know we're due to finish about 11:45 today. You have my full permission to stay with your headphones on for an extra half an hour.
Thanks.
People might think that you're in the meeting still. Yeah, I love that one, Gemma, as well. Let's just check in with the chat as well. Stephanie there, noise cancelling headphones. Earphones can't always be seen. So Zoe says big headphones or big ear defenders could kind of like do that kind of stuff as well. I try to avoid busy days in the office as possible. Yeah, that's a nice one, Jane. So if your own work pattern means that you can choose which days you go in, perhaps because physical stealth and camouflage in the home or the remote working environment is more challenging. A lot of us do now appreciate the opportunity to go back in to the office. Then maybe, choosing the quiet day occasionally could be good as well. Sarah says that when I'm in the office, I sit with my team, so I am disrupted quite frequently. The only way I manage is by ensuring I work from home at least twice a week. Yeah, so look, there's a really good example there of the benefit that we can get to sort of use the whole remote versus in office as a form of stealth and camouflage in its own right as well. Susan says, I have a dedicated room at home. Oh gosh, those of us that have a dedicated room, we know that we are very, very fortunate. So I can actually shut the door. Office, I make the day. 1 day of teamwork, and I only go in 1 day a week. I'm not sure I interpreted that right, Sarah. I think you might have been saying that you go in to work in a team mode 1 day a week and you go in to work in solo mode 1 day a week, or perhaps that you mean something else. Martin, you're exactly right. Good to raise these issues in team meetings to reiterate how we'd like to work and the benefits, as well as supporting colleagues. That's exactly the kind of reflection we have when we get to the social stealth and camouflage section. Good tactical use and stealth and camouflage is good for everyone. It must never and not be a selfish game. It's about making sure that we all have the need for that balance between solo mode and team mode as well. Martin there, good contribution, just recognizing what it's like for those of us who have smaller people in the household. Lots of different contexts will be there with the attendees today as well. So sort of thinking about tag teaming or just letting the smaller people know that we're in a certain mode for a little hours, checking they've got snacks, all that kind of stuff. Again, that can be under the social mode as well. Ken there says, I agree. We are meant to be in the office half the week to interact and collaborate. So I try to focus the quiet working when from at home. But then again, those of us who will know that there's loads of interruptions at home, isn't there? The doorbell ringing, deliveries, the person in the back garden who just decides now's the time to kind of strimmer their lawn and stuff like that as well. Stephen's asked me a question. Stephen says, Lee, can you make a comparison about the type of work we do? For example, if I work as an admin, maybe I could avoid certain distractions. But if you work frontline, you cannot help but be distracted. Yes, really good point. I think that's a really good general point as well when we introduce people to each of the productivity ninjas. Like everyone's work context is going to be different. Everyone's preferences and environment and personality and workflow is going to be different. So what we're trying to do is offer them to you as a mindset. And then you've got to think about which deployments are both necessary and also realistic and possible in your particular thing as well. So it would be very different for somebody who's maybe predominantly desk-based and remote working all the time, as opposed to somebody who is, in a customer-facing role. I remember once working with a university team that was like student support, and students would walk in to this office and there was 4 or 5 people there. And, the student would bimble in and just sort of randomly talk to the person who was nearest the door every single time, even though that wasn't nominally their duty. So that team ended up getting one of those big foam hands that you see at sports events, and they used to hang it from the ceiling tiles in a different position each day on a rota. And then there was a nice friendly sign with a smile that said, "This person will help you this morning," and stuff like that as well. But Sarah, you're right. The reason we might do that kind of stuff, Sarah has just said in the chat, frontline staff also need to have some time in their schedule and in their workflow to focus on other kinds of tasks. So when we get to social, sort of duck and cover and rotoring with other people might be something that we talk about as well. If there's any final thoughts that you'd like to put in on physical stealth and camouflage, we can loop back to this one later. Please do put them in the chat, or if somebody else wants to come in on voice about this one before we move on. We've just got maybe a minute more to pause here. And I will have a sip of the water. Peter there, yes. Peter said use flexi options to arrive early or late, depending on preferences or circumstances. I call this one temporal hiding. So if you are able to not increase the numbers of hours by going in early and staying late every day, but maybe shifting the hours, then you might find that you get a couple of hours in the office that are relatively quiet before everybody else either comes in and or have left. Sometimes temporal hiding comes up as well in the digital stealth and camouflage that we're talking about. June there says, my roles means I'm getting incoming distractions during this session. June, I'd wish I'd issued you with a large stick that you could have prodded people away with during the session, but you perhaps maybe are talking more about digital interruptions and distractions. So we are going to move to that section in a minute. Naomi says, book desk near the team, but perhaps in the middle of the team if need a more focused day. So yeah, if you are going into the open plan, and a lot of desks now are more kind of flat desk, hot desking, work pods, meeting rooms, thinking not only about, do I go into the office to do this, but like where in the office do I position myself to do this particular task, even if it's only for part of the day, something like that as well. Excellent. You can still add more in. Remember, your chat contributions are not just there to let me know if you're embracing the stealth and camouflage tactics yourself, but also you might inspire the other people on the session with that. Martin there said, tell everyone you've lost your voice, works wonders. Yeah. Is that an official version of camouflage? I think it might be. I like the playfulness. I'm not sure how long you'll get away with that one forever though, Martin. We'll see. So let's move on to a second flavor, just to inspire you in some slightly different ways. We call this one digital stealth and camouflage. The conversation has naturally come up already, but let's attend to it specifically. It's because of this. You've already mentioned this. I'm sure you might recognize some or maybe even all of those little tools and platforms and icons. Some of them we had in the before times, but obviously the world of work has changed over the last 4 years as we've moved to a much more hybrid. And even more of these tools are now in play alongside each other in parallel, perhaps, as you said in the chat, duplicating each other. And it's not necessarily made it easier to have all these wonderful high-tech digital communication systems in place. So let's have a little think about how we could flex in a positive and productive and fair team play way the digital stealth and camouflage. It's like, how are we dealing with some of this? David says, and look, I didn't even ask you to, but like people have already got thoughts on this one in the chat. Keep them coming. Deem says Teams messages are a nightmare. Yes, so we've got our Microsoft Productivity Ninjas public workshop coming up in a few weeks. I'll let you know how you can see all our public workshops towards the end of today's session. People are still looking for how to fine tune their use of Teams and stuff like that. Steph there mentioning the idea of managing your notification settings. How kind of reachable are you by the various pings, particularly maybe thinking about that on duty and off duty kind of boundary. Jenny's turned down the email notifications and just does emails when I'm in a naturally good place in my workflow. Love it, Jenny. That could have been a thought directly from our Getting Your Inbox to Zero workshop, if anybody's done that. We also are doing a taster in July in a similar style to this one, called How to Make Your Email Life Suck Less. So if anybody would like more on that, they can come to that one as well. Zoe there says, I have no notifications on, especially as I'm in multiple shared mailboxes as well. Yeah, and then adding in everything else, that would be just too much. Adrian there says, I put my phone in silent mode and put it in a drawer. Absolutely love that one. If anybody wants to come in on voice with any thoughts on digital stealth and camouflage or the challenges of digital overload and overwhelm, I'll look for hands up in the participant list. But meanwhile, we got lots of really good stuff coming in the chat. I'll mention a few of my favorites. So work offline mode in Outlook or your email platform of choice. Some of you might be here on organizations that are using G Suite or Google Apps and stuff like that. Alan's just mentioned work offline mode actually as well. Lets you get to the emails you already have, lets you compose and even send replies as well, but you don't get the new ones coming in as well. Got a little phone there on the bottom left of the screen with the do not disturb. So that's just nodding to us about the idea of your notification protocols. You could go into flight mode, silent mode, priority mode, lots of different options depending on whether you're on iOS, Apple, or whether you're on an Android phone. Naomi said there, I block out Outlook Diary for focused work. Yes. So calendar stealth and camouflage is a really good one as well. We can all see each other's calendars these days, or we can often see each other's calendars these days. Some person might look at your calendar and go, oh, look at all this free space in between meetings. That means they're doing nothing. I can have a piece of them. It's like, no, that's when you were planning to do your stuff. So you might actually want to put meetings in your diary in order to get first dibs on some of that, what other people might perceive as free space, etc. Jess there with a good one on digital stealth and camouflage for meetings. I block out an hour for 45 minutes. I like that one. I could see that we could all do ourselves a kindness with something like that. So yes, maybe you kind of block the actual meeting as 45, so everyone who's turning up knows that it's coming, but then immediately put like a buffer meeting before or after it so that you've got the ensuring of space like that. Jane, I ensure my diary is blocked out completely and then nobody asks to have a piece of it. Yeah, I quite like that one. That does also sound like it could be quite overwhelming. Remember to keep it fair, keep it playful. We're talking very much about stealth and camouflage in the interests of solo mode here. We do also need to recognize that team play mode is important in Productivity Ninja practice, but we've got other tasters on the YouTube channel where we've done little extracts from things like the Guide to Hybrid Working session and the Supercharge Your Team Comms session, which maybe press into a little bit more of that. And Alan, you're right there in the chat. The reason I would keep reading out the good ones so the people on the YouTube recording can do that. Microsoft Bookings app lets you automatically put in buffer time before and after. Really good to ensuring that you've got the space for the meeting prep and also some of the follow-up options as well. And I also saw somebody mention a little higher up in the chat the idea of using focus mode as well, which is now built into Windows 10 and 11. Lots and lots of really good stuff here. Jane says, when people ask for meetings, I let them know which tasks I can move for team mode. Yeah, so a little bit of negotiation around, okay, well, if you really need me, we can make this work, but just be aware that I'm therefore going to need these other parts of my day or week. Definitely for me, keeping it fair like that. Just on the theme of keeping it fair, I've just got a few more slides that I had in reserve if I needed to stimulate this conversation, but this conversation's going really well. Digital stealth and camouflage is really, really important practice these days because of the overwhelm of messages and now the multiple tools that can message you. It's not just texts and emails like it would have been some years ago anymore. People are feeling really, really kind of this contradiction between there's just so much of it, I can't see the path through, but then also on the other side, it's actually really hard to get hold of everybody else and get an answer out of them because, of course, they are experiencing exactly the same on their side of things as well. So I did mention that there is a taster up on the YouTube channel. I'll let you know how you can watch all the past sessions like this towards the end of today. But on our Supercharge Your Team's Comms session, we do encourage teams to actually sit down and have a chat around how are we using these platforms and tools as a force for good rather than sometimes the source of the grind and the heat. And to actually have some kind of agreement about which platform is used for which kind of communication, how they are used, what the sort of protocols are around when you will be online, when it's absolutely fine, or recognize that you will be offline, response times, and availability status and things like that as well. So Naomi, there's a really good thing in the chat about having the out of office on in email. Give people the reassurance like, yeah, I've got your thing, it'll get into my workflow, but you need to know it's going to be 3 hours, 6 hours, 2 days, whatever the sort of churn time is going to be based on your work pattern that week. I would particularly advise part-time people to maybe even put your part-time work pattern in your email signature. Quite a lot of people do that these days, but I still see people who haven't thought of that one. And it just gives you a bit of a reassurance that hopefully people will know that you don't work Tuesdays. And so you're not going to get back to them today. And then even during the course of the working day, the idea of using different ways to signal what kind of mode or mood or availability status that you're in. So there's a lot of discussion about Teams today, which would be natural. A lot of people from larger organizations or organizations using the Microsoft tools. We tend to use Slack inside Think Productive. And there's just some real examples there from our own team channels about letting each other know what kind of mood or mode that we're in on a particular day. So maybe we just got a minute or two for any final contributions. The conversation started quite naturally in the chat, so this is what I would have put on here to stimulate that if it hadn't already started. But maybe got 2 minutes if anybody wants to raise a hand to come in on voice, or any final contributions coming in the chat as well. Layla says, bit of self-management too. Yes. I've mentioned the taster we're doing in July, how to make your email life suck less. Those of you who can get hold of the book can have a look at chapter 4. There's a lot of behavioral stuff baked in here around our own attitude to those messaging responses and our own habits and behaviors there. A little bit sideways from our agenda today on stealth and camouflage. But definitely in play, and hopefully the thought will have been provoked today as well. My general idea is that, emails are not a medium that should be used for somebody who needs a response within 5 minutes or even in half an hour. Just sort of slowing down the hamster wheel of electronic communication could be really, really good. Stephen Carney says, Lee, do you do a course for people who are chronically interrupted and notice on the door saying you're in a meeting and they still knock? So it might come up in social stealth and camouflage, which is the next section, which is, and somebody's mentioned this already, like actively encouraging and having this conversation as a team. You're very, very welcome to send the YouTube link to this session. This recording will be up on YouTube in a couple of days. Send it to team members and say, hey, maybe it'd be good if we had a chat as a team around how to get this good balance between solo mode and team mode. Get your head down, get some stuff done versus communicate, collaborate, make sure everything has what they need as well. Because Lorna's quite right. Lorna's just put in the chat the idea of that once your concentration is broken, it's not just the the idea of like, oh, well, I need to go off task, do that for 3 minutes, and then I'll go back to where it was. There is the sort of the spinning back up to speed, the where was I? Oh, do you know what? I wasn't enjoying that anyway. Oh, maybe I'll have another cup of tea, or maybe I'll just go and check a few other emails and stuff like that. There is a bigger deficit of that interruption other than just the actual minutes spent dealing with it. Thank you, Martin, for putting in a plug for one of our other books. I've waived the How to Be a Productivity Ninja main book in this on the screen, but there's also this book, which is the one that Martin is mentioning, by Graham and my colleague Haley, How to Fix Meetings. And I think, yeah, maybe some of the stuff that has come up naturally in this discussion might relate to meetings practices as well. And again, those of you who've not met Think Productive before know that we have lots of thoughts about meetings and how to make them better as well. Let's just start to loop this together. So this is the third variety of stealth and camouflage. We call this one social stealth and camouflage. And it is really about this stuff that has just started to come up with Stephen's question and some of the thoughts before about signaling to people at a distance who can see you via things like headphones or flags. It's the idea of like, let's make this fair, let's make this even. You know, we can be a little bit playful and a little bit experimental, and I hope you will be in the interests of finding good solutions. But we do need to recognize that this is a good thing to do, but we also need to make sure that people still are able to get what they need and work in the way that they need to as well. So maybe we get a couple of people coming on voice to kind of expand this idea of how to do this well collectively as a team or as a small work group, or maybe even as a whole department. If you've got a thought or question or reflection on that, you could raise your hand or you could bring it in on the chat as well. And then I'll need the last little 5 minutes of the workshop just to wrap us up on time. The idea they've got the little person there working in their bubble, they are alongside their colleagues. There are benefits in terms of motivation and energy and camaraderie of working in shared spaces. Some of us who work remotely nearly all the time do miss that, and we found ourselves having to replace that in different ways. But there are times when you do need to be in the office because maybe physical stealth and camouflage at home is not possible, but you just need to let people know that now is not a good time, or maybe people know that now is the good time and now is when they should come as well. Haven't seen a message in a chat for a while, so I'm a little worried that maybe you've all dropped out. I'm hoping you are all still here. I will put my official little discussion prompt up. And Alan, I'm sorry if you had your raised hands. You should now be able to unmute and talk.
Hiya. I tell you what we do. We tend to, as a group, as a team, have a particular hour in the day where we all just stop talking. So we just call it a power hour. So we get loads done. So nobody's to interrupt anybody for that 1 hour.
Yeah, love it. So yeah, it has lots of hours like deep work, power hour, library time, like whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that's a great example of having a chat as a team and saying, surely we would all benefit from 1 hour at least a day like that. Like, should we try that? And, you know, people have done digital versions of that. Let's not have any Teams meetings, or let's agree to not send any electronic messages during this hour or something like that. So yeah, I really like that. How big's your team in terms of how many people you have co-opted into that movement?
There's about 6 of us.
Perfect. Yeah. And sometimes when people say, oh, you want me to go away and like get my people in a meeting to talk about all this stuff, like it doesn't have to be that formal, although we can come in and help you facilitate your own team comms charter. It can just be sometimes a little informal chat between, as you say, the 5 or 6 people that work together most frequently. And you could take a lot of heat out of it by just fine-tuning some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, we also give ourselves like a 20-minute warning. So we all go and make tea, coffee, and get everything ready.
Oh, I love it. So there's that feeling of like we're entering the quiet zone. Yeah. It's like, you know, if you're going to need to speak, you better do it now because we're going into it. And is it one of those per day, or do you do it like morning and afternoon?
Usually one a day. And,
yeah.
and it's usually about 2 o'clock-ish. So you've had lunch, you've all come back, started chatting, and then we all just say, right, actually, I've got to get stuff done
Yeah.
And and then everybody gets everything ready as well. Like you tend to get the job you want to do for the next hour,
Yeah.
all prep, and then actually coffee's there, right? Headphones on and just go.
That was the last note I was hoping you would bring in, which then also has interesting interactions with what people then decide to do during that hour. And I think you phrased that lovely. You've also helped me answer the question from James above in the chat saying, how is this different for physical stealth? The difference is it might include physical and digital stealth practices, but it's more about this. How do we do this collectively kind of aspect? How do we create rules, protocols, habits, rituals as a team, agreements kind of thing is kind of what the difference is as well. I'll just loop a few more in from the chat. Thank you, Alan. If anybody else does want to speak, we've probably got a chance for one more. Jenny says, I find it useful to have an active signal up from a questions chat as well as the opposite. Yeah, I love that, Jenny, particularly like line managers. You might have this concern or they might have this concern. It's like, oh, that, team leaders going stealthy. Like, what if I need them? So getting that balance between parts of the day or week where you are in the two contrasting modes as a team leader. People have called it like shop hours or like open door time, like, not literally physically referring to the door, but, get me if you need me. And if people know that there's enough of those regularly, then people store up stuff for those opportunities rather than dribbing them in all the time. So yeah, Naomi, there you've just made a very similar point in the chat. Having regular one-to-ones that and have planned in means that stuff gets saved up and done in those times where it's probably going to be done better. And then you start to carve out these windows of solitude and stealth in between those, both you and them as well, the team members and the team supervisor as well. Latrice there, again, recognizing the difference there between social and stealth as well. Ken there says, great, I need to be disciplined and actually put these ideas into practice. Is it possible to save this chat? On an in-house workshop, we do allow delegates to save the chat, Ken. We don't tend to do it on larger open workshops because obviously people don't know where they're coming from and stuff like that. And also I didn't warn people at the beginning of the session that chat could be savable. I will save a copy of it, Ken, and if you're desperate for a copy of it, drop me a line, but I will redact everyone's names from it before I send it out to them as well, although Jane has already found a sneaky workaround. So there you go. On Ken's point, let's start making sure that you have got something written down. So I'm just going to give 30 seconds for you to note down, if you haven't already, maybe 4 or 5 actions that you're going to take away from this session that you're committing to yourself now. They might be physical, they might be digital, they might be social, stealth and camouflage. And if you just note down 5 for yourself, I'm not going to ask you to share them in the chat. 5 priorities for flexing and testing out your productivity ninja stealth and camouflage skills. If you find it useful to structure them as stop, starts and continues, you can. But if it's just as simple as I'm part-time and I'm going to put my non-working days in my email sig, then that would be a good one as well. So we'll have 30 seconds pause there. And meanwhile, I will get ready to share with you some good stuff. And Ken, this might be where you can actually get some more of these specific ideas. And remember, of course, this session is going to be on YouTube within a couple of days as well. So you can listen back and have a go at noting down all the stuff from the discussions. So 1 minute to go. I traditionally stay around for like a few minutes of after show, but there will be people who have another meeting to go to. So if you are a regular on the series of free webinars with Think Productive, you'll know all about how to book yourself on and find out about the upcoming ones. If you happen to have randomly wandered in here for the first time, or you're catching this on YouTube, head to thinkproductive.co.uk. I'm putting that web address and loads of other stuff in the chat, and you can see what's coming up in the next couple of months. We've got all sorts of topics. We got one next month on meetings. I'm back in July talking about emails. Then we've got some stuff from our L&D portfolio, Thriving Teams coming up in September after the August break. And then you can see that we've got our colleague Graham's book launch one in October about kindness at work. Those are all free, available to absolutely anybody. For a modest investment, we also have public workshops. So even if you're not able to invite us into your workplace specifically, go and have a look at the public workshop calendar as well. And we've got, those are paid opportunities, but they're pretty good per delegate rate. And you can see that we've got a whole kind of roster there as well. And the last things that I put in the chat is how to get hold of us, how to find out more about us on the website, and how to book for these sessions as well. So thank you for coming. We are officially at time. Trademark characteristic of Think Productive sessions is we finish on time. So if you do need to rush off, you are now officially released. But if people do want to hang around, maybe they've got more questions, maybe they want to chat more on voice, maybe you want to put something else in the chat, or maybe you just want to hang around because you are scrolling up and down the chat in order to harvest some really good ideas that you missed along the way, then I'm happy to sit here for 4 or 5 minutes and just see if anyone needs me. Other than that, thank you very much, and goodbye to those on the YouTube as well, because I'm going to ask our team to cut the recording in 3, 2, 1. See you all. Bye.